So if you remember back to last week, we can iterate through arrays for each loops, right? So last week we talked about the bear store, and we have bears, and we're iterating through each of them, right? Well, we can do the same thing with an array list. For each element in with the name of whatever we're giving it in the array list, then go ahead and process it. So here you can see we have element type bear, element name. Okay, that's our temporary variable that we're going to use to access it. And then here we have the array list bear, right? So for each bear in bears, we are going to display it. Okay, pretty straightforward. Of course, we can use traditional loops to iterate through our objects as well. Like in this example, we have a typical for loop header for int I equals 0, while I is less than bears.size, I plus plus, bears.get, I.display. All right, that's a lot of code to write when we could simply write for bear, whoops, where's my parentheses? Bear in, right? That's ARS, not beers. ... do something, right? That code is much cleaner and easier to read than this code right here. So this implementation is preferred over the other one. All right. Now, unless you have a reason where you need this index, right? Because if you need the index right here, then obviously you can't do the for each loop. You got to do the regular for loop. So let's take a look at some of the pros and cons of using array lists versus using standard arrays. So the benefits of an array list. It's easy to increase the size of it. You just call add and it will automatically add the object to it, right? You don't have to add additional code to once the array is filled to copy it over to a new array that's, a bigger array and then copy all the items one by one, right? You just call .add. It's also easier to insert and remove elements from the array list. If you remember, trying to insert an element in an array is a pain because you have to first make sure you have enough space, and then you have to, for all the items after where you want to insert, you have to move them all down, and then you can insert your item. Well, with an array list, you just call insert, and the code does it for you automatically. So somebody's already taken that time to do that. Now, what are the benefits of using a standard array? Well, a standard array uses the bracket notation to access things very quickly. So it's really easy in get and set methods, right? Or easier than get and set methods. And it's also more efficient when storing primitive values because you don't have to use the wrapper classes. So take that for what it's worth and think about that when you're developing your own programs. Now, up to this point, every time that we have almost every time where we've used an object, we have assigned it to a reference variable. I think in the bears demo that we did, the Hunger Games bears, I used an anonymous object, but I didn't talk about it. So let's go ahead and take a look at what anonymous objects are. When storing objects in an array list, like I said, it's common to create an object and add it to the array list all at the same statement, right? For example, you can see here a bear object being created and added to the bears array list all in the same statement, right? So we saw, I did this in the Hunger Games bears version, right? We added and we're creating a new bear, and here it's called, the company is called Acme, and it's a brown teddy, right? An anonymous object is an object that is instantiated, but it's not stored in a variable. And with no variable, there's no name for it, right? So we say it's anonymous. So this bear right here is anonymous. Nobody ever gave it a name. It's just a reference. It's just a memory location, right? And then here we're naming our bear, but then all we're doing it is adding it and storing it to our array list. So using anonymous objects is actually a good thing, right? Because it simplifies our code. There is no need to actually give this bear a reference when all we're going to do is stick it into an array list. So here's another example. Where are we creating an anonymous object? I'll go ahead and start the clock and you see if you can find it. And time's up. Hopefully you found this guy right here. Okay, I know 10 seconds was kind of not a lot to get through the code, but you'll get faster at it. So while we won't take a look at the whole program, it's really not that important. You just need to be aware that when you create objects and pass them around without storing them in a reference variable, you're using anonymous objects, right? So here we are returning a new bear of maker and type, right? All right, so that's an anonymous object. So to recap, the bear store program contains several examples of using anonymous objects. And in general, you'll see anonymous objects being used in two main ways. Number one is passing an object into a method, like this, or returning an object, like this. So that's the common place where you're going to see anonymous objects being used.